My boss thought I needed him, so I started my own company. I used to believe loyalty mattered. Not the fake corporate kind printed on motivational posters. I mean real loyalty. The kind where you stay late to help your team hit impossible deadlines. The kind where you skip vacations because your boss says, "We're counting on you." The kind where you build someone else's dream like it's your own. And for 6 years, I gave everything to that company. Then one Friday morning, my boss proved something I'll never forget. To him, I wasn't a partner. I was disposable. And that mistake ended up costing him everything. My name's Ethan Carter, and this happened in Chicago 3 years ago. Back then, I worked for a mid-sized software company called Betrayal Dynamics. Nothing glamorous. We built logistics software for trucking companies and warehouse chains. Boring industry. Decent money. I started there at 26 as a junior operations analyst. By 32, I was practically running the place. Not officially, of course. Officially, my boss Nathan Reed was the genius behind the company. That's how he liked it. Nathan was the kind of man who walked into every room like he owned oxygen itself. Perfect suits, expensive watches. Fake, humble smile. Clients loved him. Employees feared him. And somehow, I admired him. At least at first. He had this way of making you feel chosen. You've got leadership potential, Ethan. You're different from the others. One day this company will reward people like you. I believed every word. Big mistake. For years I handled crisis after crisis while Nathan took credit publicly. When our largest client almost canceled a $2 million contract because of a software failure, I stayed awake for 36 hours fixing the issue. Nathan got interviewed in a business magazine for his leadership under pressure. When our warehouse integration project succeeded ahead of schedule, the executive board applauded Nathan's strategy. The strategy I created. But I kept telling myself the same thing ambitious employees always tell themselves. My time will come. Then came the promotion. Or at least, what I thought was the promotion. I still remember that Monday morning. Nathan called me into his office with that polished smile. "Close the door, Ethan." I sat down already feeling excited. The senior director position had opened after Melissa retired, and everybody knew I was the obvious choice. Even coworkers were congratulating me early. Nathan leaned back in his chair. "You've been incredibly valuable to this company." That word, valuable. Not respected, not important, valuable. Like equipment. "I appreciate that," I said carefully. He nodded slowly. "Which is exactly why I need you to stay where you are." The excitement in my chest disappeared instantly. "What?" "We hired someone externally for the director role." I blinked. "Allie, after 6 years?" Nathan kept talking like it was completely reasonable. "You're too essential in operations. Promoting you would leave a hole we can't afford." I stared at him in disbelief. "So because I'm good at my job, I don't get to grow?" He smiled like he was explaining something to a child. "Ethan, not everyone is meant for executive leadership." That sentence changed my life, because 5 minutes later, I walked out of his office and saw the new director for the first time. His name was Kyle. 28 years old. MBA from some expensive private university. No industry experience, no leadership experience. But he played golf with Nathan on weekends. That's when I understood. This company wasn't built on talent. It was built on ego and connections. Still, I tried to stay professional. I really did. For the next few months, I trained Kyle myself. Imagine that. Training the guy who got the career you earned. Every meeting was torture. Kyle would repeat my ideas almost word for word, and Nathan would nod proudly like he discovered the next Steve Jobs. One afternoon, Kyle actually said something that made my blood boil. "You're lucky Nathan kept you around, Ethan." Most executives wouldn't tolerate employees challenging leadership. Lucky. I nearly laughed in his face. Without me, half their systems wouldn't function. But that's the thing about toxic workplaces. Eventually, they convince good employees to doubt their own value. And honestly, for a while, it worked. I stopped sleeping properly, started stress eating. My girlfriend Sophia kept telling me I looked exhausted. You need to leave that company. Easy to say. Hard to do when your entire identity is tied to your job. Then came the meeting that finally broke me. Quarterly review. Big conference room. Executives everywhere. Nathan stood at the front, presenting revenue growth numbers I personally helped create. Then suddenly, one board member asked a question. What's driving the operational improvements this quarter? Nathan glanced toward Kyle. This is largely due to Kyle's leadership initiative. I froze. Kyle looked surprised too, because even he knew it was a lie. I waited for Nathan to correct himself. He didn't. Instead, he continued praising Kyle, while my work, months of 80-hour weeks, got handed to someone else in real time, and nobody said a word. That moment taught me something dangerous. If people are willing to erase your contribution publicly, they've already stopped seeing you as human privately. That night I sat alone in my apartment, staring at my laptop until 2 a.m. Then I did something small, something stupid, something that changed everything. I opened LinkedIn. That's it. I wasn't even planning revenge. I just wanted to breathe for a second. While scrolling through old contacts, I noticed something interesting. 3 former clients I'd worked with had all left positive comments on projects I managed personally. Not Nathan, not Varello, me. And suddenly a thought hit me. What if the relationships weren't loyal to the company? What if they were loyal to the person actually solving their problems? Me. The idea haunted me for weeks. At first it felt impossible. Starting a company? I didn't come from money. I didn't have investors. Hell, I barely had confidence anymore. But once you realize your boss needs you more than you need him, you start seeing everything differently. So quietly, carefully, I started preparing. Business licensing. Watched startup videos at night. Built rough software models during weekends. And most importantly, I listened. Clients constantly complained about Varello's outdated systems and slow customer support. Nathan ignored them because profits still looked good. I saw opportunity. There was a gap in the market for something faster, simpler, and more personal. The kind of company Varello used to be before ego infected leadership. For 8 months, I worked 2 lives simultaneously. Corporate employee by day, future founder by night. Sophia became my biggest supporter. Every night she'd sit beside me on the couch while I worked on prototypes. You know what your problem is? She said once. What? You still think Nathan gave you your success. I looked at her quietly. She pointed at my laptop. You built those client relationships. You solved those problems. You earned that reputation. Then she smiled. He just stood near the spotlight. Nobody had ever said it that clearly before. 6 weeks later, I resigned. Nathan actually laughed when I handed him the letter. You're emotional right now. Take the weekend and rethink this. I already did. What exactly are you planning to do? I looked him dead in the eye. Build something better. That smile disappeared immediately. For the first time in years, he looked nervous. But only for a second. Then came the arrogance again. But talent without infrastructure means nothing. I nodded politely. Maybe he believed that. Maybe rich executives genuinely think office buildings create success. But deep down, he knew the truth. People create value, not logos. My first 6 months as a business owner were brutal. No glamorous movie montage, no overnight success. Just fear. Constant fear. I worked from a tiny rented office above a laundromat. The air conditioner barely functioned. Some nights I slept at my desk because driving home wasted time. I burned through most of my savings faster than expected. And every single morning, I wondered if Nathan was right. Then came my first client. A regional trucking company Varello had ignored for months. I met the owner in a small diner outside Indianapolis. No fancy presentation, no designer suit, just honesty. I told him exactly what I planned to build and why corporate software companies stopped caring about businesses like his. At the end of the meeting, he looked at me carefully and said, "You actually understand our problems." That sentence nearly hit me emotionally, because for years, I'd been invisible inside a company where I did all the work. Now suddenly, being myself was enough. He signed a 6-month contract that afternoon. Then another client came, then another. And here's the funny part. Most of them weren't choosing my software at first. They were choosing trust. Trust in the guy who answered calls personally. Trust in the guy who remembered their names. Trust in someone who treated them like partners instead of invoices. Within a year, my company grew from 1 employee to 11. Then came the moment Nathan truly panicked. Long-term clients switched to us completely. Not because we were bigger, because we were better. Word spread fast after that. Suddenly people in the industry started talking about our company, about innovation, customer support, efficiency, everything Varello used to claim about themselves. Then, one Thursday afternoon, I received an email from Nathan. Subject line, lunch? I laughed out loud. For 6 years, that man barely had time to acknowledge my existence unless he needed something. Now he wanted lunch. Curious? I agreed. We met at this expensive steakhouse downtown. Nathan looked older, stressed, still polished, but tired underneath. After small talk, he finally got to the point. "You've done well for yourself. Thanks. I underestimated you." That was probably the closest thing to an apology he'd ever spoken. Then came the real reason for the meeting. We should discuss a partnership. There it was. Not respect, not remorse, need. He needed something. I leaned back calmly. What kind of partnership? Nathan slid a folder across the table. Acquisition proposal. He wanted to buy my company. I almost smiled. 3 years earlier, this man told me I wasn't leadership material. Now he wanted ownership of the business I built from scratch. What makes you think I'd sell? He gave me the same corporate smile I used to admire. Because scaling independently is difficult. Eventually, you'll need infrastructure. Same line, same arrogance. Only this time, it sounded desperate. I closed the folder slowly. "Nathan, do you know the biggest thing I learned working for you?" His expression tightened. "What?" "That companies fail the moment leaders start believing employees need them more than they need employees." Silence. Heavy silence. For the first time ever, he had no response. So I stood up, adjusted my jacket, and left the restaurant. And honestly, that should have been enough. But life had one final twist waiting for me. About 8 months later, Varello Dynamics announced massive layoffs. Turns out Nathan ignored modernization too long while focusing on appearances and executive expansion. Clients kept leaving, revenue collapsed, and eventually, the board removed him as CEO. I heard the news while sitting in my own office, overlooking downtown Chicago. The office my company owned. The company he thought would fail. One of my employees walked in smiling. "You hear about Varello?" "Yeah. You okay?" I looked out the window for a moment. Then I realized something strange. I didn't hate Nathan anymore, because revenge stops feeling important once your life finally becomes your own. That's the part nobody tells you. Success isn't satisfying because your enemies lose. It's satisfying because you stop needing their approval to win. A few weeks later, I received one final email from Nathan. No subject line. Just one sentence. "You were the best employee I ever had." I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I archived the email without replying. Because he still didn't understand. Supposed to be an employee forever. And the moment he treated me like I was replaceable, he accidentally created his biggest competitor.